give the call to the Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Prime Minister. The National Australia Bank has confirmed Labor's toxic taxes will send rents soaring by 30%. Will the Prime Minister guarantee rents will not go up by 30%?
Order. Prime Minister has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Today, NAB has clarified publicly, to quote the National Australia Bank, this was not a forecast, and it's important to note that we do not forecast rental yields. And a couple of points to make, Mr Speaker, that those opposite seem to have missed. The budget made no changes for people who already negatively gear property. None whatsoever. Arrangements that were in place up to budget night remain grandfathered in. So how could it possibly be the case that you can have this sort of absurd justification? Going forward, of course, negative gearing and the 50% capital gains tax discount can still be used for investment properties, but on new builds. So that when people are investing, they're not only investing in their future wealth and assets, they're investing in the future wealth and assets of the nation. And that is already making a difference.
Order. The Prime Minister will pause. The Leader of the Opposition, point of order.
Relevance, Mr Speaker. Look, the question asked a very simple proposition that the National Australia Bank had put, and it asked whether the Prime Minister was prepared to guarantee that rents won't go up by 30%.
I think the difficulty with that point of order is that the Prime Minister directly dealt with that issue in about the. Just let me finish, Leader of the Opposition. That the quote or comment that you moved, he dealt with that straight away. He's got the remainder for his answer of 1 minute 45 has to remain directly relevant. He can't stray into other topics. He'll have to remain his answer directly relevant to the question he was asked. And he has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. And I was asked about NAB, and I've said exactly what NAB said today. And I'm sure perhaps the Australian might clarify its position tomorrow. They might. But that is very clear from NAB. And you can't be clearer, Mr Speaker, and there's a reason for that, of course. Because the budget made no changes for people who already negatively gear property. And it's already making a difference. According to ABS data released on Friday last week, more investors are borrowing to build new homes than ever before. In the June quarter, there was a 27% increase in investor loans for new builds and a 20% increase for construction loans. That is, more investors are borrowing for new builds and more new builds are being constructed by developers. That is happening. And that's precisely what the aim of the policy was to do. The aim of the policy was to assist with housing supply, because we know that housing supply is absolutely critical. The ultimate aspiration for any Australian is to own their own home, and backing that aspiration is what our reforms are about. And throughout all of this debate, I haven't heard one person, perhaps the Leader of the Opposition might be the one, who thinks that the housing system is working. Exactly right. None. It is a broken housing system that we inherited, and we're fixing it to give young people a fair crack.
The call to the honourable member for Gorton.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering real change for working people, including those in the gig economy? Are there any alternative approaches that would undermine the wages and conditions of Australian workers?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Gorton for her question. And yesterday, our world-leading protections for Australia's gig economy workers came into force. a source of great pride for those on this side of the House, delivering real change for thousands of working people. People who don't have a lot of power in their workplaces by definition. The people who are delivering food or delivering products to someone's door contribute to make life easier for Australians, but they don't have a great deal of industrial power. What it took was a government prepared to act on their behalf.
That's right.
Minimum standards, minimum wages, protecting the Australian way of a fair day's wage for a fair day's work, something that Labor has fought for since 1891. Now, the fact is that our economy has changed, and there are great benefits for Australians of getting things delivered right to your door. And that flexibility is a good thing. But just because jobs and industries change and adapt doesn't mean that working people deserve less protection or lower wages. Because when change happens, it's up to us to shape it for the better. For too long, delivery drivers in the gig economy fell through the cracks. No fair pay, no sick leave, no basic protections, and that happened because of those loopholes. And put simply, at times it not only wasn't fair, it's outright dangerous, because we know of the examples of people, delivery drivers, who've lost their lives because they're trying to get from A to B in 15 minutes for something that should take 25 or 30. So taking risks, literally losing their lives, is what has occurred. And that's why we passed this closing loopholes legislation, to make sure that every worker gets a fair go. And whilst we fought for and delivered that change, those opposite, the Liberals and the Nationals, did everything that they could to stop it.
That's right.
They voted against the legislation. They argued against the decision. They said reforming the industry was just too complicated. They chose to ignore the problem, and then they argued against fairness. That is their playbook. Labor chooses a different path. We choose to act, we choose to back working people, and we choose to deliver real change.
Hold on to your hats, because Question Time in Canberra just delivered a classic case of political acrobatics. The opposition tried to throw a massive scare campaign right at Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, claiming that a National Australia Bank statement proved rents were about to soar by a terrifying 30%. They demanded an ironclad guarantee that rents would not skyrocket. Sounds dramatic, right? Well, grab your popcorn, because that headline collapsed faster than a cheap deck chair on Bondi Beach.
When you look past the panic, the Prime Minister completely dismantled the claim. It turns out NAB explicitly clarified their statement was not a forecast at all, noting they do not even forecast rental yields. It's like blaming your local meteorologist for a rainstorm they never actually predicted. The government then laid out the cold hard facts on their housing policy. Existing negative gearing and capital gains tax discounts remain completely untouched for current properties. The new tax settings target new builds exclusively, driving capital directly into fresh construction rather than inflating prices on existing homes.
And the empirical evidence is already rolling in. Latest Australian Bureau of Statistics data shows a massive 27% surge in investor loans for new builds, alongside a 20% jump in construction lending. Think of it as shifting the nation's financial engine from an unproductive game of real estate musical chairs into actual, physical house building. The goal is simple: flood the market with supply to fix a housing crisis that has been brewing for a decade. Naturally, the opposition pulled the emergency brake with a point of order on relevance, claiming the Prime Minister was dodging the question. But the Speaker shut it down, ruling the response was directly addressing the core of the panic. Now, just when you thought the dust had settled on housing, the chamber shifted gears to another massive battleground: the modern workforce and the gig economy. While the housing debate raged, the government highlighted brand new world-leading gig economy protections that just came into effect.
For years, food delivery drivers and rideshare workers operated in a regulatory Wild West, facing minimal pay, zero sick leave, and dangerous time pressures. These new laws establish baseline minimum standards and fair pay rates, closing loopholes that allowed massive platforms to undercut traditional labour rights.
The Prime Minister framed this not as bureaucratic red tape, but as a fundamental moral obligation. When delivery workers are risking their lives in heavy traffic just to meet an algorithm's unrealistic deadline, doing nothing is not an option. Yet the opposition voted against the bill, claiming the system was simply too complicated to fix. It exposes a stark contrast in philosophy, one side arguing that economic modernisation requires basic human fairness, while the other defends the status quo. At the end of the day, whether it's building more homes or protecting delivery drivers, politics comes down to who is actually doing the heavy lifting for everyday Australians. Thank you so much for watching.